Think about the last time something didn't go the way you planned. Not a minor inconvenience. A real one. A diagnosis you didn't see coming. A relationship that fell apart. A prayer that seemed to go nowhere. What did you do with God in that moment? And don't answer that with the version of yourself you want to be. Answer it with the version of yourself that actually showed up. Because here's what I've noticed, and I mean in real people, not just Bible characters. When life hits hard enough, one of two things happens. Either you run toward God, or you quietly, almost without realizing it, run away. And the tragedy is that most people who run away don't know they're doing it. They still show up to church. They still use the right language. But something shifted, and the distance got bigger. This week's lesson is called Setbacks. And it's not about pretending setbacks don't hurt. It's about what you do with God inside them. Let's get into it. The memory text this week is Romans 5 verses 3 to 5. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. Now hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who was given to us. Now notice what Paul does not say here. He does not say, avoid tribulation. He does not say, pray hard enough and it will pass quickly. He does not say, real Christians don't struggle. What he actually says is this: tribulation produces something. It's not a dead end. It's a factory. Tribulation goes in. Perseverance comes out. Perseverance produces character. Character produces hope. And hope, real hope, not wishful thinking, does not disappoint. Because it's anchored not in your circumstances, in the love of God. That's the chain. And that chain is built in a storm, not in sunshine. Sunday, life storms, Mark 4 verses 35 to 41. Sunday's section opens with one of the most familiar scenes in the Gospels. Jesus and the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. A storm. A terrified crew. Jesus asleep. And I want to slow this down, because there are details here people fly past. First detail: Jesus falls asleep on the one pillow in the boat. That pillow belonged to the person at the stern, the one steering, the driver. So Jesus didn't just fall asleep. He fell asleep in the driver's seat, at the wheel, eyes closed. Storm coming. Second detail: Peter, James, and John were professional fishermen. This was their sea. They had navigated these waters their whole lives. They did not panic easily. When they panicked, it was bad. Third detail, and here's the part that stopped me. This is the only recorded moment in the Gospels where Jesus is sleeping. The whole ministry. All those chapters. One nap. And it's during the worst storm in the disciples' lives. You know the difference between a surgeon who steps out of the room for a moment and a surgeon who doesn't show up at all. Same absence. Completely different meaning. One of them is still your surgeon. Still responsible. Still coming back. The other one abandoned you. The disciples couldn't tell the difference. Do you not care? That's what they asked. Mark 4 verse 38. Not. Help us. Not. Wake up. Do you not care? They questioned his character. In the middle of the storm, they looked at Jesus sleeping and decided to admit he didn't love them. And if we're honest, really honest, that's the question we ask too. Lord, do you even see this? Do you even care? He woke up. He rebuked the wind. And then he asked them something that we need to sit with. Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? Not. I understand why you panicked. Not. That was a bad one, I get it. He was surprised that they had been with him this long and still didn't know that the storm could not take them. What is your usual response when the storm comes? Do you run toward him? Or do you question his character? Monday. Be made well. Mark 5 verses 21 to 34. Monday moves us to a woman in the crowd. She's been sick for 12 years. She's spent every coin she had on doctors. And instead of getting better, Mark 5 verse 26 says, she grew worse. 12 years. Every resource gone. And now, worse. But she hears about Jesus. And she does something. She gets out of bed. She finds the crowd. She pushes through. Think about what that cost her. She was ceremonially unclean. According to Jewish law, everyone she touched that morning became unclean too. She had no right to be in that crowd. She was not supposed to be there. And she said to herself, "If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well." Mark 5 verse 28. Not his hands. His clothes. She wasn't even reaching for the man. She was reaching for the hem. You know the difference between someone who watches a fire from across the street and someone who runs toward it because someone they love is inside. Same fire. Completely different commitment. She ran toward Jesus. And something happened. She felt it immediately. The healing. In her body. She knew. And Jesus stopped. In a massive crowd. He stopped. "Who touched me?" His disciples looked at him like he had lost his mind. There were 100 people pressed against him. But he knew. Because this touch was different. It had faith behind it. She came forward. Trembling. Afraid. And he said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Daughter. Not. Woman. Not even. Sister. Daughter. That is not religious language. That is family language. That is what he calls someone he belongs to. The lesson here is not, "Have more faith and your problems will go away." The lesson is, draw close. Don't just watch from a distance. In your setback, press through the crowd. Get as close as you can get. Because the touch of faith, even a trembling, desperate one, he feels it. Tuesday, Job 19 verses 23 to 27 and Job 23 verses 8 to 12. Tuesday brings us to Job. You know the story. Most people do. Wealth, gone. Children, gone. Health, gone. Wife, in her grief, tells him to curse God and die. Friends show up and spend multiple chapters explaining how it's all his fault. And here is where the lesson gets sharp. Job doesn't understand what's happening. He says so directly. Job 23 verses 8 to 9. "Look, I go forward, but he is not there. And backward, but I cannot perceive him. When he works on the left hand, I cannot behold him. When he turns to the right hand, I cannot see him." He can't find God. He's looking. In every direction. Nothing. And then, Job 23 verse 10, this. "But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold." That is one of the most faith-forward statements in the entire Bible. I cannot find God. I cannot see him. I cannot perceive him in any direction. But he can see me. And what he sees, he's not abandoning. He's refining. You know the difference between being lost in a building you've never been in and being lost in a building while someone who knows every room has their eyes on you the whole time. Same lost feeling. Completely different reality. Job didn't know that God was watching. He believed it. Without evidence. Against the advice of his friends. Without resolution. Job 19 verse 25. "For I know that my Redeemer lives." Not. "I hope." Not. "I believe it will work out." I know. That is what Romans 5 is describing. Tribulation. Perseverance. Character. Hope. Job walked the whole chain. Chapter by chapter. Loss by loss. and came out with a picture of God that no comfortable life could have produced. Your setback might be doing the same thing. Not to destroy you, to refine you. All right. Let's pause here for a second. We've covered a lot. The storm on Galilee, and how we question God's character when he seems to be sleeping. The woman who pressed through the crowd, because distant watching isn't enough. Job, who couldn't find God but trusted he could be found. If any of that hit you, we're not done yet. The second half of this week goes somewhere even deeper. Quick word before we continue. These videos exist because people watch them, share them, and choose to support the channel. If this content has been part of your walk with God, consider becoming a member. Your support keeps this free for everyone who needs it, wherever they are in the world. We don't take that lightly. To everyone already partnering with us, you're part of every video we put out. Thank you. All right. Let's keep going. Wednesday, the road to Emmaus, Luke 24 verses 13 to 27. Wednesday might be the most emotionally honest section of the whole lesson. Two disciples, walking away from Jerusalem, going to Emmaus. The crucifixion is 3 days behind them. The resurrection hasn't landed yet. And as they walk, heartbroken, confused, replaying everything, a stranger falls into step beside them. They don't recognize him. That detail matters more than we usually let it. This is Jesus, the man they had followed for 3 years. They heard his voice. They watched his hands. They knew his face. And they didn't know him. Because grief can do that. Because when you're in the middle of a setback, your eyes don't always work right. The stranger asks, "What are you discussing?" And one of them, Cleopas, says something extraordinary. Luke 24 verse 18. Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who doesn't know what happened? Think about that. He's talking to Jesus. About Jesus. Explaining the story to the man the story is about. We were hoping he was the one to redeem Israel. We're hoping. Past tense. It's over. The hope died on Friday. And Jesus, still patient, still walking beside them, opens the scriptures. Starting from Moses, all the prophets, showing them that this was always the story. That the cross was not a defeat. It was a destination. They didn't understand until he broke bread with them. And their eyes were opened. And he vanished. And they said, Luke 24 verse 32, Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us? Here's what I want you to carry from Wednesday. Jesus is still walking beside people on their road to Emmaus. People who are walking away. People whose hope died. People who are explaining their grief to him without knowing it's him. He doesn't announce himself. He opens the word. And at some point, the heart starts burning. That is what the Bible is for in a setback. Not comfort in a general sense. A stranger beside you on the road. Opening a story that turns out to be about you. Thursday, see Jesus, Romans 8 verses 18 and 28. Thursday's section does something unusual. It brings in a dream, recorded by Ellen White in early writings, pages 79 to 81. A person sitting in despair, wishing they could see Jesus. A guide appears. Come! You can see him. But bring everything you have, and follow me. She describes a steep stairway. The instruction, keep your eyes up, not down. Others fell. At the top, a door. The guide says, leave everything you brought. She lays it all down. Enters. And she sees Jesus. And she writes, Such a radiant expression of benevolence and majesty could belong to no other. His gaze, she says, showed he already knew every circumstance of her life, every inner thought. And instead of judgment, fear not. There's a detail I want you to sit with. Before she could see Jesus, she had to leave everything at the door. Every trinket, every possession, everything she carried. The scene required the releasing. In a setback, we often hold tighter to control, to our own explanations, to our plan for how God should fix it. And sometimes the room where Jesus is standing is just past the place where we let all that go. Romans 8 verse 18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Romans 8 verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. Not some things, all things. Not, if they go a certain way, work together, as a whole, toward good. That is not a denial of pain. Paul is the one who wrote it. Paul, who was beaten, shipwrecked, imprisoned, abandoned. He didn't write Romans 8 verse 28 from a comfortable chair. He wrote it from a life that had been broken in almost every direction. And he still said, all things. That is what a relationship with God that has survived setbacks looks like. Not the absence of suffering. The presence of a person. In it. With you. Working. Let me bring the week together. Sunday showed us that when Jesus seems to be sleeping in our storm, the real question is whether we still trust his character. Monday gave us a woman who pressed through the crowd in desperation and discovered that trembling, reaching faith is exactly the kind he responds to. Tuesday showed us Job, unable to find God in any direction, choosing to believe that God could find him. And he did. Wednesday brought us two disciples walking away from everything they hoped for, and Jesus walking beside them the whole time without them knowing. Thursday and Friday took us to the room where Jesus is standing, where everything has to be set down before you walk through the door. Here's what I want you to carry out of this week. The setback is not the end of the story. It is often the part of the story where the most important things happen. Check your response. Not the polished version. The actual one. When the storm hit, did you run toward God? Or did you quietly manage the distance? If the distance grew, it's not too late to press back through the crowd. Here's something practical for this week. Write down Romans 5 verses 3 to 5 by hand. Then, underneath it, write the name of the tribulation you're currently in. And trace the chain: tribulation, perseverance, character, hope. Where are you on that chain right now? Because the chain ends in hope. And hope, Paul says, does not disappoint. The difference between a setback that breaks your faith and a setback that builds it is not the size of the storm. It is whether Jesus is in the boat with you when it hits. One leaves you drowning. The other ends with, "Why were you afraid?" If this gave you something, share it with someone who is in the middle of their own storm right now. Someone walking toward Emmaus. Someone sitting in the crowd, too exhausted to push through. We'll see you next week.